So this week we are discussing how to focus stack your images in architecture photography.
I don't know what you've been told, but this here is not your home. You want some trouble, you want some.
I'm on tour currently with a friend from the USA. We're in the sanatorium town in the west of Georgia. I thought it'd be a great opportunity to stand and talk with you about focus stacking, and in particular focus stacking alongside bracketed shots. So yeah, let's jump right in and have a chat. So when shooting architecture images, you usually want your focus to be on everything in the scene from front to back. We're also normally using lenses such as this 16 to 35mm. However, remember, when using wide angle lenses, I rarely use apertures such as f22, f18 because this causes diffraction. I also want to use my lens at its sharpest point. This wide angle lens, for instance, is sharpest point f8, and my tilt shift is 7.1. The problem is that these apertures, we struggle to get all of the scene this close in focus. So how do we get everything in the foreground through to the background sharp? Well, let's run through it. Lining up my composition, I've come up with a problem. Some of the elements in the scene are very close to the front of my lens, which means I'm now beyond the capabilities of my wide angle. So I'm going to now have to choose a method called focus stacking. However, as I bracket my shots, I'm going to have to combine those two methods. Next up, activate the 2-second timer. This just helps you eliminate camera shake in between the focus stacked images. If your camera has this option, make sure you pop it on. First we select our aperture and select in-camera bracketing. Second, focus on your infinity point and then take your bracketed shot. Next we focus on the midpoint, focus there, hold focus to shoot those brackets as well. Finally, we focus on that foreground, the all-important foreground. Take your brackets there as well. Okay, so how are you going to remind yourself that you've got focus stacked images after a week-long trip, like I'm on? I like to take a single exposure of just my hand pointing to the left, and it reminds me that when I'm looking through the catalogue, that there's an action to complete from the images before, such as focus stacking. Okay, so now we have our shots. So what next? Well, we need to edit them, of course. So I like to use Lightroom and Photoshop as a combination. They work very well together. I use my Lightroom as a catalogue and as an organiser, and also to combine any images like HDRs, bracketing, that kind of thing. And then I like to move into Photoshop for sort of heavier or bulkier work. In terms of focus stacking itself, you would need to use Photoshop. You can use other software programs to combine images like this. However, these two work really, really well together, and they help with my workflow overall. So it's well worth checking out, and see right through till the end, and we're now going to combine those images. Okay, so here we are once again in Adobe Lightroom. Now, imagine you come back from your trip and you're looking through your large selection of images. What you'll see here as you're scrolling through all of my images is these hand signals. basically showing me that obviously the images before this one are focus stacked, the one before here is focus stacked, so on and so forth. And that's the reason why I did that. Now the second thing is I've shown you all the examples here of all of the images I took to show you really sort of the thought process behind what I've originally selected, what I'm now going to select going forwards. So I looked at these images here. So this is a selection of exposure blends and exposure brackets. And you see here what I've got is this one. That's my first composition I did. I feel like it's a little bit too central, got a little bit too much staircase, a lot of this window, and it's not as pleasing composition. So I eliminated that one straight away from my thoughts. The next one that I looked at was after this finger here. I've got this one, which is nicer and better in terms of a composition. However, I feel like this is a little bit tight to the very edge here, and obviously because of the bend in this ceiling, if I pull that straight, that's going to be very, very close to the edge, which I don't think would then give quite the composition that we're looking for. So I'm going to eliminate all of those. They're the ones that I've basically decided against. Okay, so then what you'll see here is you'll see that I've got my selected images that I've already chosen. If you look at this, it's a much more pleasing composition, but if I bend this into position, you'll see here that it will give me, it's got a little bit more space here. So when things straighten up, it will still be a nice, neat and tidy composition. And I've already, so the first thing that you would do is you would come here, and each of these, first of all, need to be exposure blended. So that's what we're going to do here by shift click, obviously select the first one, shift, and then press click on the last one, and then you can right click, photo merge and HDR. Now when you do that, you're going to get a preview box that pops up looking something like this. It shows you kind of like how to merge those images together. Now you need to do this process with each set. So the first set, the next set, and the third and final set of 3 brackets, because it's very difficult to see as you're going to, as you look at these, which one's got the better focus. It's really difficult to tell here in Lightroom. So we blend them together. You press so on there. I'll bring that back up again for you guys. So you press photo merge, HDR, and obviously that's going to bring up basically this box. You would make sure that auto align is ticked to align all of the images. Leave auto settings off. If you put that on, it's going to sort of do a predetermined look of what Lightroom thinks this image could look like overall, which it's up to you whether you want to leave that on and use it as a starting point for your edit or not. But in this instance, we're going to leave it off. D goes to mount. There shouldn't be any movement. We've shot this on a tripod, and you would then click photo merge. Now I don't need to do that because I've already merged all of these, but if you did so, once you press merge, you'll get here a little box and it shows creating HDR, and obviously you can let that process. You need to do it for this set here, the middle set, and you do it for the final set of focuses. So basically 3 sets of images, and you'll remember that's what we shot in the field. So I'm just going to cancel that merge, and the reason why is because when we scroll down, I've already predetermined what we're doing. Once you've done that and you've merged each set of 3 images, that leaves you with 3 exposure blended versions of this shot. And what we're going to do is we're going to get rid of all of these images. So hang on, select the right ones first of all. So we're going to get rid of these, and we're going to go in here, select all of these, and we're just going to delete those from Lightroom. So the 3 that we're left with here have very different focus points, and it's, like I said a minute ago, it's really difficult to kind of look at the difference between them and tell. What I can say though is that one of them moves, which means there must have been some sort of movement that's taken place in between our shots. So what I'm going to do here is go to one of these, go to develop. I'm going to come in. Now, I mentioned last week on my video, if any of you have got this kind of setup where if you right click here, you've got solo mode, you can click that on. Now solo mode basically means that when you open one of these tabs, it closes the others, and it keeps you quite organized so you don't get lost within the settings of Lightroom, especially if you're quite new to it. It's a good thing to do. But the other thing as well here is I need to do a couple of changes, one of which is auto on my transform, and that should bring this edge up and make a sort of auto adjustment. It didn't look like it moved it too much, so I'm just going to do it myself to make sure that we're lining things up as I think they should be. That looks a lot more neater, and also it's quite hard to see my exposure, so I'm just going to do some basic adjustments really so that we can kind of see kind of how this final result's going to look. That'll do me for now. Then what I'm going to do is get this image here, right click, develop settings, press copy, just there like that. And I'm going to copy those settings to the other 2 images here. Just like that. Okay, so they're now prepared and ready to bring it into Photoshop, which unfortunately is where we have to do the focus stacking. So what we're going to do is highlight all of them again, press edit in, and this time something totally new that we've not done before on this channel is go down here and we're going to open as layers in Photoshop. Okay, so they've all opened in Photoshop as separate layers. So anyone that doesn't know Photoshop, these is where your layers pull in. So these are actually, as you can see, you can unselect with this eye tool, each of these, and you can check them on and off, and that's turning the layer on or off. And there's still some movement you'll see here between my images, which we'll get onto in a second. Now, one thing I'm going to do before I get onto kind of how we're going to blend these together is talk about a bit about workspace. Now, I haven't talked about Photoshop much on this channel so far. For me, I always set things up like I've got all my tool presets down on the left, my layers are nicely here, my channels, my paths for all my pen tool cuts. I've got my all of my color tools here that I use, different blending, luminosity skills that I use here, all the different presets and different plugins. I've also got here like my library for basically for sort of like a purple in the shadows, I call it. It's basically to get color tones within my images, so it's kind of presets. And also here filter, we've got 4 more kind of plugins that I use attached. So I always save this workspace, so you can do so yourself here. There's some essential sort of ones here, some basic ones that you can kind of do predetermined looks, but I prefer to make my own workspace and have things set up exactly like I want. So here all we've got to do is press shift and click. So you click the first one, select it, shift and then hold it, and then click the bottom one to select all of those layers. And then what we're going to do is 2 simple maneuvers. Edit, auto align layers. That brings up an auto align layers box. Press auto, that's absolutely fine. So press select, and what that's going to do is basically align our layers for us. So even if there has been some movement like I've got here in this image, it's going to line those up and get them neat and tidy for us so that these really focus stack properly together. Now usually there shouldn't be any kind of movement within the images. I don't know why it's happened for me on this instance. I must have knocked the tripod during filming, but for yourselves, if this has happened, this is a great example of how you can then correct that. And Photoshop does a great job of auto-aligning these 3 layers together. Okay, and there it is, it's done. It's blended them together in a kind of nice organized way, so there should be a lot less movement on the stairs, and you can see there is. So keep them selected, so make sure they're all still selected. Back to edit, and this time, instead of going to auto align layers here, we're going to go just underneath to auto blend layers. It brings up a different box, and it's basically called auto blend layers, same name. There's panorama at the top, and that's obviously to do what it says, blend together images in a panorama, but we're going to look for stacked images, and we're going to select the box, seamless tones and colors, and press OK. Okay, and that's it. Once it's done, it pops up like this. It looks no different. It's really hard to tell until you see these layer masks here on the right hand side of the images. And basically, if you unselect each of these individually, you can see which parts of the image have been taken, and Photoshop has basically predetermined which parts are in focus in that which is the sharpest part of the image for that image. And then once it blends it all together from front to back, you've then got extreme sharpness right the way through the scene. And that includes the pillar that's right here at the foreground of the image. You can see there that obviously this part here, it determined that the top layer is the sharpest part for that image. So once it blends them together, that's the final result. Once this is complete, on the right hand side, you'll see a selection on each of the 3 layers. This is actually just selecting the 3 focus parts of those images, and they're all there collected. So you can actually turn each individual layer on and off just to see which parts are in focus and which parts it's not selected. Once you've done that, control click, select all of the layers, right click, flatten image. Then go to File, Save, and once you've done this, it will send the image back across to Lightroom, and you can actually close down that file. Okay, so once I've saved it like I just suggested, it sends a file straight back here to Lightroom, and that's brilliant because it now shows us our 3 raw files that were blended from exposure blends, and then we've now got our focus stacked final result. And you can tell the difference between them by hovering, and that one's called a TIFF. These ones here, if you hover on this, it's going to be called a DNG, which is still a TIFF, but it's a Lightroom file. So what I'm going to do is delete all of these, what I'm going to do then is delete all of these ones here, because for me, these are now not my raw files. This one here is. This is my final result ready to edit. So I'm going to delete these files here, get rid of those,
and that leaves me with one final image to start editing. And for me, it's as simply a case now as using the crop tool. And again, I did a video a couple of weeks ago all about the crop tool and why I prefer it in Lightroom. So if you haven't done so, so I use the crop tool here in Lightroom because I find it better processing power, and I just really like the way that it works. It's very, very intuitive. If you haven't seen my video already, a couple of weeks ago, I did a video all about the crop tool, and you can check it out in the link above. Once I've cropped this image in, you'll get rid of that dead space, and that's how you tell the difference really between the other images as well. Is obviously I save it and send it back with that dead space, and it easily alerts me to that's the final photo. So from here, you can edit this as you wish. It's entirely up to you. See more outside, see less outside, whatever you think's best. This is now personal preference.
Okay, so now you're armed with this technique. You can use it to increase your composition options when you're out in the field. Okay, so that's all for this week. If you've enjoyed that video, then do please tickle that like button, share this video with a friend, and if you've got any further questions, place them in the comment section below. I'll see you all. Until next time, bye-bye for now.